my name is Gary McRae, Head of Electric Mobility at Urban Foresight. So I've been working in the EV field, probably some people here know me, for about 11 years now. So kind of got a good handle on what's going on in Scotland, but the kind of area of accessibility and inclusive networks has been something that we worked on as an organisation for the last couple of years quite intensely. And so, yeah, we're hoping today to try and introduce you to some of the topics, some of the things we've been working on, some of the research we've done, some of the findings. And I think the biggest challenge for me today is not to step on anybody's toes and go into too much detail for the speakers that are coming up later on today. So quickly, what I'm going to talk about, the scale of the issue or scale of the challenge. I suppose an issue, it's how big the network has to grow and what we need to do. Some of the kind of high level challenges that we see and we know we're trying to address, that we're working on, how you can use inclusive design to come up with solutions to make charging more inclusive, and then who needs to be involved. So try to have just a quick overview of what kind of organizations need to be involved in this, and yeah, just what their role may be in the future. So kind of starting off at the scale of the challenge. So while I say I've been working in this field for 11 years, starting in 2011, the first 4 vehicles, Scotland, as part of vehicle stock, has only got 1.55% of vehicles are on the road just now are electric. Where do we need to get to by 2045? We need to get to 100% if we're going to hit some of the net zero targets. So while a lot of people have been working in this field for a long time and made a lot of good progress, we're still at the very start of this journey. So I feel like we've still got an opportunity to do things properly, to improve on what we've done so far to date, to learn lessons from this industry, from other industries, from looking at things we do quite a lot like petrol stations, how the user engage with that, interact with that, how can we learn lessons from that. So we've got a significant amount of work still to go. So while we maybe could have done things better in the past, we've still got the opportunity, I think, going forward to make sure we do things better in the future and make things as accessible as possible for everyone. So that's in the vehicle side. On charge points, I think there's 2,800 charge points being installed in Scotland over the years, over the last 10, 11 years. Some of them have been done a long time ago, like say the first one we put in 2011, where you just bought a charge and you tried to get it in the ground as quick as you could, and not really thinking about accessibility and inclusive design. So how many more do we need to put in? Some figures out there suggest that Scotland needs up to about 30,000 charge points by 2030. So again, just highlighting that we're only at the start of this journey. We've got a long way to go. We can start working hard now, working with all the partners, working with organizations that are here today to try and improve what we do and make sure that when we get to that figure of maybe 30,000 by 2030, that they're accessible, the network of charging points is accessible and is as inclusive as we can make it by that point in time. So yeah, as I said, we've been working hard on this over the last couple of years. So I'm kind of going to run through some of the high level findings that we've come across, the things that we've identified. So you'll see there some of the research just on how big the numbers are of people that may be living with a disability, how many people have mobility issues, and just starting to kind of broaden the range of things we think about. I think for myself and lots of people, when we built our first hubs and we talked about accessibility, we just looked at the kind of height of the charger point and maybe looked at some of the bay size. So they are still relevant today, but they're only just a start. And so it's about widening our thinking, widening how we tackle this and making it for everyone. I think that's important. The work that we've done today, that any improvements to the charging experience, how you use it, will work for everybody. So making all these small little changes that will, some of the projects will come and talk about today, make the charging experience better for everyone. So I think that's important. This is for everybody that uses this, and trying to make the user experience as good and as seamless as possible and straightforward as possible. So what else have we been finding? These are kind of, some of these quotes are from the research we've done. We've done a lot of in-person trials. We've done a lot of work with disability groups, trying to come come to sites, tell us what the problems are, tell us what the challenges are, what have we done right, what have we done wrong. So again, it's just looking at things like trip hazards, it's looking at things like bollards, it's looking at plinths, it's looking at how the solutions at the moment require you to bend down and pick up cables. So kind of looking at everything from the moment you stop the car to the moment you kind of start that charge, that whole process, and how are people interacting with that, how are people using it, and trying not to make assumptions, trying to really understand how people in real life use the charge points at the moment, use the cables at the moment, and really try to work through that and make that experience a lot better for them. So the impact, I suppose, of those barriers for us was really interesting to find out when we did some research. So only 25% of the people we spoke to in a survey through the RIDC said that they would make a switch to an electric vehicle just now. Over 60% said that if charging was more accessible, they would think about that. So that's for us a key number, where people who are kind of considering the switch to an electric vehicle are seeing the current charge points out there as not very accessible to them. So what we have to do is try and make them as accessible as possible. There are always limitations on a site. That means you can't do everything you may want to do, but we really got to think about it. And we'll talk about some of that more in the projects we've been working at later on, of how we've gone about trying to make them as accessible. And then there's other group that have not even considered as an option. So it's 20% of people not even thinking about an EV. And that's probably replicated right throughout the population. And I think that's something that people who are involved in the EV world sometimes forget. We kind of get, it's part of our everyday life. We kind of live it and breathe it. But there's a whole section of the population haven't even thought about electric vehicles yet, are still just want to replace their vehicle with a nice vehicle. So we've still got a lot of work to do to them to convince people that the change is worthwhile. I think for me, and my personal opinion, that an electric vehicle offers the opportunity to refuel in a much more convenient and efficient way. If you're going to work every day and you have a charger at your work and you can plug it in, it doesn't really take any time out of your day because you'll be parking there anyway. It takes you 30 seconds to plug in. So I think the way of EV charging fitting in with lifestyles offers the opportunity to think about things completely differently from the standard petrol station model. So I think we've got to take those opportunities. We've got to understand that EVs don't have to be the same as ICE vehicles, and we can do things differently. So yeah, taking these figures on board, understanding that there are real challenges out there and that we need to do things better to help people make the switch to electric vehicles and kind of get those environmental and financial benefits that electric vehicles do offer people. So once we've kind of been looking at this in more detail and some of the projects, like I say, that coming up today, we'll talk about these things in more detail. The kind of three areas that we identified where there's work to be done is the physical environment. And again, we talk about the bollards, the plinths, the area around the charge point, where it's situated in a car park. All those things come together to kind of make an accessible and an inclusive network. So the physical environment is one area, the hardware, so that's the charge points, the cable management. How do we make sure that that's a lot easier to use and a lot more straightforward, and kind of tackle some of those comments that was showed earlier about people having struggling to use, needing two hands to use the current infrastructure just now, but maybe if you have a walking stick, that's not so easy. So kind of how do we adapt the hardware to make sure it's as accessible as possible? And then finally, that's that user experience, and that kind of, it comes across a lot of things. It comes across payment methods. So how do we make sure that's simple for people? How do we make sure that the signage is okay for everybody? How do we make sure the lighting's right? The kind of whole experience of turning up to a place, it's not in the, like say, in the dark back corner of a car park. How can we make that user experience as pleasant as possible and something that people don't feel anxious about? So yeah, just kind of turning up and using the charge point becomes part of their normal routine and they feel comfortable with it. This next graphic just shows some of the things that we look at, and we're starting to try and work out how can we solve that. So there's the obvious things, like I said earlier on, like bay sizes, there's shelter, there's signage. There's lots of things that we kind of consider standard, but some things that we've identified, the surfaces and the gradients, ensuring it's maintained properly can really highlight issues for people. If they're going to turn up at a charge point and it's maybe not working, then that can cause real anxiety. We've got things like emergency call centers. So is there somewhere that people can help and call for assistance? And I think there'll be maybe one of the projects today we'll kind of talk about more like that. So again, we've got the height of the charger, the payments, how do you initiate the charge session. So a whole range of things that we need to think about. And I think for us and the work we've done, it's recognizing that, like I said earlier, you might not be able to make the perfect charge point or charging solution at every single site, but have you done the best that you can at each site? Have you made it as accessible as possible with the restrictions that are there, whether that be financial or space? But it's just making sure that we can say that we've thought about these things, we've included them in the design. And yeah, really just starting on that journey, recognizing that we'll do things next time which is slightly better than we did before, and then that's a kind of continuous improvement. So we will over time develop these charge points that become as accessible as possible, and hardware might develop and the space around it, and our thinking might develop as well. But really just understanding that we're on the start of a journey, and if we all work together on this, we can make things a lot better. So I think one of the things that we've kind of been brought home to us by the organizations we've worked for is making sure you include people in the design process. So really understanding how people interact with products, how people use products, how people move around a charge point is really important for us. And like I said earlier, not making any assumptions, not assuming that we understand how different groups of people with different needs will use the charge point. So really the work we've been doing through research is asking people what they think, how they would design it, going away, mocking up prototypes, coming back to our kind of testing, the people that have helped us with the testing products with it, seeing what works, and that iterative approach to design, but with as wide a group of stakeholders as possible to make sure that the solutions that we come up with as an industry work for everybody and not just specific groups, but they make the whole process easier. So you can see there the kind of live trials we've held in Cheltenham, we've held in Dundee, we've been to all over the UK holding these trials and trying to get as many opinions as we can. And it's good to get that kind of feedback of identifying different issues, different challenges, and kind of including that within the design. So finally, before I finish today, it was just who should be thinking about this, who should be involved in this process. That's a mock-up of what we've done. So could and should charging infrastructure look like that? You know, nice bays, no bollards, lots of space around the charge point, signs at different heights. Yeah, the wheel stops, just consistent marking, consistent images, charge points with the screen at the right size, the sockets at the right size. You know, thinking about all those things. So a lot of things need to come together to make what we might consider at the moment an ideal site. And so who's involved in that? So designers, whether that's landscape designers, product designers. We've got charge point manufacturers. Obviously, they are now with the past guidance that's due to come out later on this year, which I think Caitlin will touch on, kind of setting some standards that they're going to have to adhere to. Local authorities are definitely involved in this because a lot of the land is on local authority sites. Car manufacturers should be involved because there's maybe some things that they could do better with when building the vehicles that we could make the charging process simpler, such as everybody put the charging connector at the same point in the car, just really helping us. There's funders. We've done a lot of work with Transport Scotland, Scottish Enterprise and Innovate UK. We've been lucky enough to secure some funding to really try and develop some products that start tackling the issues. There's experts in the field, so that's EV experts, so that's accessibility experts, that's inclusivity experts, you know, bringing them all together and working with as many different organizations, getting as many different voices as we can into that inclusive design process. So yeah, that's it from me today. I'll